Hello, everybody, and welcome to the new short series where I'll be talking about the new items per category. Today, we're going to start with the Vitality category, and so I'll be talking about overall the balance changes within this category. All of the new items, we'll be covering them, and we'll be talking about any item that I think might be standing out as very strong or a little bit weak or all of that stuff. So, to get started, let's cover every new item that was added in this patch within the Vitality category. In the tier 1 800 category, there's Rebuttal. This item reduces your parry cooldown and makes it so that when you successfully parry an attack, you heal for the damage that would have been dealt. And you also return the damage to the person that meleeed you. And you get increased melee damage after. So it feels incredibly overstated. Essentially, if you parry someone, you get hugely rewarded. Like, parries are already pretty rewarded in this game, but with this item, you parry someone in lane, they're essentially just instantly dead because they're going to take damage from their melee attack that they would have taken. And on top of that, you get bonus melee damage on top of them, and they're parried, so they get more damage, so they just pretty much die instantly. This item is also particularly good against certain heroes, for example, Viscus. I know my camera's blocking it a little bit. Okay, so I've adjusted the camera so it doesn't block the text as much. But yeah, this item is very, very good against Viscus. Any melee build essentially gets pretty hard countered by this item if you get parried. So definitely quite a strong item situationally. It doesn't have any upgrades though, so that's the worst part of it. With the new limited slots, having an item that's an 800 cost that doesn't have any upgrades, this item, you know, at some point you're going to be pretty blocked off with this item and you're going to want to sell it. So that's definitely the biggest drawback of it. Now, there's a new vest, Battle Vest and Enchanter's Emblem, which are essentially a combination of armors and barriers previously. These items are pretty self-explanatory, so both Battle Vest and Enchanter's Emblem are essentially the same thing. Battle Vest gives you weapon damage, fire rate, and bullet resist. The weapon damage and fire rate are conditional. You only gain it when you're above 65% health. And Enchanter's Emblem is the same thing before Spirit, so you get Spirit and cooldown reduction when you're above 65% health. Guardian Ward is like technically a new item, but also technically not. This is essentially what the old Divine Barrier was. It's just that Divine Barrier got moved to the tier 4 category. This is just gives you a shield to someone. And the thing is, the cooldown is reduced by half when cast on someone else. So they're clearly marketing certain items towards supports, right? You're incentivized to use it on other people, not on yourself. Whereas with Divine Barrier previously, you might as well just use it on yourself. And it was kind of, really annoying because of that. And finally, we have Spirit Shielding and Weapon Shielding for the Tier 2 category. These are essentially, you could see them as the replacement for the barriers that we had previously. Spirit Shielding and Weapon Shielding both activate when you take a burst amount of damage in a time frame. So for the Spirit Shielding, you need to take 150 Spirit damage within 3.5 seconds, which honestly is really not that hard. And from the Weapon Shielding, you need to take 200 weapon damage in 3.5 seconds, which is also not that hard. And then you get a 400 barrier for both, and the barrier scales 1.2 spirit scaling. Now in the tier 3 category, we have a lot of new items. So bullet resilience is essentially improved bullet armor. The biggest difference is that it gives you additional bullet resist when you're below 30% health. So when you're really low, you'll get, a little bit tanky. I will say I have not noticed it that much, but it's an effect that's similar to like what Frenzy has, for example, and it's interesting. Counterspell. This item, in my opinion, is the coolest item that's ever been added to Deadlock. I love this item. And this item, we'll talk a little bit more about the balance and some certain outstandings, but people are saying this item is OP. I don't personally think so. I'll elaborate on that later. But it's so fun to use, and like parrying ultimates feels so good. I'm sure that having your ultimate parry doesn't feel great, but when you use it, man, it's a blast. That's why I love this item. Essentially, you can parry almost any ability. I actually haven't seen an ability that you can't parry yet. I've heard that you can even parry Black Hole. It just gives you a little bit of time to move out of it. I've parried Geist Swap. You can parry Lash Ult. You can parry Infernus Ult. There's so many abilities you can parry with this. Yamato Power Slash, Great Talon Arrow. It just gives you such like a cool defensive layer. And it has a fairly long cooldown too. On top of that, when you do parry successfully, you gain Spirit Power and move speed for 6 seconds. Fury Trance is an upgrade from Bullet Lifesteal. This gives you fire rate and bullet resistance, but silences you and disables stamina usage and regeneration. So essentially, all you can do is shoot forward, aim forward, shoot, move around, but you can't use any of your stamina. It doesn't regen. You can't use any abilities. For those that are familiar with Dota, this is essentially Mask of Madness. So a lot of these new items, one thing that they have in common is a lot of them are heavily inspired from Dota. Not all of them, but this one definitely is. Then we have Spirit Resilience, same thing as the Bullet Armor, does exactly the same thing, so I'm not going to cover it too much. We have Trophy Collector, which is a very interesting item, and I have a lot to say about this item. But essentially, whenever you score an assist or kill, so whenever you participate in a kill, right, either you get an assist or a kill, you gain a stack. And there's a maximum of 14 stacks, and each stack gives you 25 health, 20 souls per minute, 1% ability range, and 0.2 meters sprint speed. So when you're at max stacks, this item is insane. This item gives you 350 health. It gives you something like 240 souls per minute, or actually it's more than that. I think it's 280 souls per minute. Let me do the math real quick. Yeah, so it's 280 souls per minute. And on top of that, 14% ability range and a bunch of sprint speed. Overall, the stats are really nice for it. 2.8 meters sprint speed. And you get 2 meters sprint speed as part of the base item because it builds out of sprint boots. We'll talk about the balance of it later, but that's a new one. Veilwalker, while not a new item, has moved from tier 4 to tier 3 once again. Doesn't give shields anymore. Shields are pretty much gone. And still makes you invis. It heals you for 150 as you go through it. Gives you health and spirit power. I think that this item is very, very strong, especially for heroes like Holiday or Paradox that are going to want to gank with it. So I think that this item, we'll talk about the balance a bit later, but it's definitely strong. Warpstone is now a green item. Nothing really about it was changed other than the fact that it gives you 0 stats, which a lot of items don't give you really many stats anymore. Within the tier 4 category, we have Cheat Death, fully new item. It makes you death immune temporarily, and one thing to note is that Shiv Execute does seem to go through it from what I've seen. And while you are death immune, you do less damage, less healing, and you move slower. This item can be good if you're playing heroes that need to get specific abilities out before you die. One example of these heroes is Lady Geist. If you buy Cheat Death, well, essentially, if someone kills you and you weren't able to get your swap off, it gives you 4 seconds to get a swap off and essentially avoid your death, right? So it's a pretty cool item. Divine Barrier is not really a new item, but at the same time, it's completely changed. Now it's a tier 4. It gives 600 barrier, 15% ability range, and it also removes all non-stun debuffs from the target, right? So what that means is Affliction, for example, just gets completely removed by Divine Barrier. It's a very strong item, and the cooldown is fairly low when you use it on teammates. It gets halved once again, right? So it's 18 seconds. And if you have any cooldown reduction, I've had it get down to as low as 13 or even 12 seconds. Kevlar, not a new item, but it's also green now. It gives Spirit Power and Barrier. It's essentially the same item, just green and slightly changed. One thing to note about Kevlar is that barriers are now universal. So they block all damage types, first of all, and second of all, they are also affected by resistances. So if you're playing Yamato, Kevlar is a lot better than it was before because you benefit from the resistances. Healing Tempo, a new item that upgrades from Healing Booster. Whenever you apply heal to yourself or an ally, grants the target bonus fire rate and move speed. This item seems pretty strong on specific heroes. I would not recommend buying this item on quote-unquote carry heroes most of the time, but it's really, really good on, for example, Kelvin or Beginnis or the more traditional supports, and it's pretty good on heroes like Geist as well. It's just like not mandatory, and it's going to be a late upgrade on those heroes, whereas on support heroes it feels really strong. Infuser, I mean, can we just talk about how sick the art for Infuser is? I mean, I love the art. Anyhow, gives 80% spirit lifesteal and 35 spirit power when you activate it, and the stats that it gives, the base stats are 16 spirit lifesteal, 10 spirit resist, 100 health. So pretty good stats. The active is very strong, lasts for 6 seconds. Infuser went from literally being a 500 cost item to a 6,400 cost. So it's kind of funny. Inflation, it's pretty rough these days. But yeah. Inhibitor is essentially the same item, except it gives healing reduction now. Juggernaut is a fully new item. And this item makes it so anyone shooting you has minus 40% fire rate. You gain 50% slow resist, 2 meters per second move speed, 25% melee resist, and 8 health regen. This is just an item for someone that just wants to get in there, create chaos or whatever. I think it's a cool item. Leech is essentially not changed much. It's pretty much the same thing. Phantom Strike, same. Plated Armor, new item. Gain a chance to either deflect incoming bullets, preventing all weapon damage, or prevent all on-hit effects from bullets. So what's important to notice about this is that this item is very good against heroes that, need to proc something. For example, Infernus, right? You buy this item against Infernus, he struggles a lot more to proc his afterburn on you, and it's quite a strong item for that. Same thing if someone has armor piercing rounds and you're just getting melted, plated armor is a good counter to armor piercing rounds. Spellbreaker, the next instance of high spirit damage you take is significantly reduced. So essentially, if you take like a burst damage that's above 150 damage, it'll be reduced by 75% on a 14-second cooldown. For example, Lash slams you for 1,000. Well, you only take 75% of that damage. Sorry, you only take 25%. So you only take 250 damage. This is very, very strong against burst heavy heroes like Lash or Yamato or even Grey Talon. And on top of that, in the base stats, it gives you 25% spirit resist and 25% debuff resist. So quite a strong item. Unstoppable is not new, but it now builds out a debuff reducer. So I thought I'd mention that. Vampiric Burst is also not new, but it's a green item now. And it gives bullet life steal and fire rate. It's essentially the equivalent of Infuser, right? It gives a similar amount of strength. I think it's cool. And last but not least, Witchmail, taking heavy hits of spirit damage. They say heavy hits, but it's above 75, so really it's not that heavy. There's a lot of abilities that hit you above 75. Reduces a random ability's cooldown by 3 seconds, and on top of that, it gives you 20 spirit resist and 10 spirit power. Now that we've gone over all the new items, let's get something out of the way. Let's talk about balance, right? So the green items in general, I think, are quite strong. I think Rebuttal is definitely extremely strong against specific heroes, but like I said, feels bad when you have to sell it. I'm not really sure about the shields yet. I haven't really used them much. They seem like they could definitely be strong, but I don't think that they're like, you know, super OP yet or anything. But then again, I'm not sure. Reactive Barrier definitely seems like it's better as well. One thing to note about Reactive Barrier is that the scaling on Reactive Barrier is much better, where you get 2.2 spirit scaling, as opposed to weapon or spirit shielding when you only get 1.2, right? So at some point, the barrier from Reactive is going to be higher than from the others, and it triggers when you get, you know, some sort of movement lock or something. These barriers trigger like very easily, I will say, right? So it's a lot of EHP for the money. So in theory, I think that these barriers are probably quite good, especially if you're playing against, you know, burst heroes. For example, let's say that, you know, Lash slams you and you have spirit shielding. Well, all of a sudden you have an extra 400 HP. It's really hard for him to kill you. I think in the 1600, one of the standing out items for me, Healing Nova seems really nice, especially with the build-up. So it builds out of Healing Right now. So it's a really nice build-up. You know, you buy Healing Right in lane, and then you just cost an extra 800 to buy Healing Nova. I think this item is really strong still. The healing also scales with Spirit 1 scaling, so it's not, you know, completely insane or anything like that. One thing that's interesting in the tooltip, so I don't actually know if this is true, but in the tooltip, it doesn't mention anything about healing more. So the previous Healing Nova said it heals more per ally around you. This Healing Nova doesn't mention anything about it. But anyway, I think it's a pretty nice item regardless. Restorative Locket also stacks with Spirit now. So a lot of the healing items will just feel a little bit better later in the game. They're not necessarily better early, but later they will feel better. I want to talk about a few of the tier 3 items because I think that those are some of the most interesting ones. I want to start with Trophy Hunter. So I saw this post on Reddit saying, buy Trophy Hunter before it gets removed from the game, or Trophy Collector, sorry. I don't know why I keep saying Trophy Hunter. Trophy Collector. And my thoughts on that is I think this item is like probably the most overrated item of the patch. I've had so many people come into my stream telling me that this item is OP, telling me all these things, and I just don't personally believe that's true. Now you'll have to keep in mind, this is my opinion. I haven't been playing for a long time. I have maybe 16 to 20 games played on the new patch, so I don't actually know for sure. But here's my thoughts on this item. This item is really good once you get to max stacks. Like, it's kind of insane once you get to max stacks, actually. The problem with it is that this item is a dead item when you initially buy it. So let me explain a few things. If you're playing a game and you buy this item early, which is what you want to do, you want to buy this item early because you want to start getting stacks. You're essentially gimping all of your early game strength for a fully dead item. You're paying 3,200 souls, and when you have 0 stacks, the only stats this item gives you is 2 meters sprint speed and 2 out of combat regen, which, let's be real, if you're fighting someone, these stats are completely dead. So what this means is that you're essentially throwing 3,200 souls into the void, and this, you know, really messes with your mid-game power spikes. Because let's say that I'm playing Lash, would I rather buy Trophy Collector, or would I rather have an early stamina mastery, which allows me to move around and, you know, just like execute my combos much better, or even Majestically, which allows me to set up my ultimates? Or would I rather have, you know, Tank Buster, or any of these other items that are just going to make me much stronger? So those are my thoughts on Trophy Collector. I don't think it's a bad item. I want to make it clear. I think it's good if you either are one, really far ahead and you can afford to buy this item and not worry too much about it, or two, if you're a hero that doesn't need items to function. What I mean by that is, let's say you're playing Moe and Krill. Moe and Krill is probably the best user of this because regardless of whatever items you have, you just grab someone with your ultimate and your teammates can kill him and you can get the stacks, you can roam around with it, right? So roaming heroes are going to like this item somewhat. Paradox and Holiday kind of similar, right? You get a lasso either way. If you have a teammate nearby, you're going to be able to kill them. Same for Paradox, you get a swap. So there's definitely use cases for this item, but this is definitely not like a must buy on every hero, and there's a lot of heroes on which it actually kind of sucks. And the amount of games that I've seen screenshots of where I've seen 4 or 5 people get Trophy Collector on each team, and they just like aren't getting kills, and then they just lose the game, is pretty funny. Now, I'm not going to tell you not to buy this item because in my previous video I said do whatever you want, explore and discover, and I want that to be true. So feel free to test out this item and see if you like it, see if you don't like it. But those are just my thoughts on the item. I also want to give my thoughts on Counterspell real quick. I think that this item, like I said, super fun to use. I don't think it's OP. The main reason I don't think it's OP is because you know, a lot of the time you have to like parry something that's very high value for it to be really good. And on top of that, when you're parrying, you're essentially stunning yourself, right? So that can be a kind of a disadvantage. I do think it's really good against specific heroes. For example, I think it's a new like counter to Lash Ult. If you're getting Lash Ulted, don't buy E-Shift, just buy Counterspell and just parry it. If you're getting Infernus Ulted, you can parry it. There's a lot of abilities that are quite easy to parry, and there's some that feel really good. But I think, yeah, based off of the cooldown and the fact that you're spending 3,200 on this, I think it's probably just balance. It might be a little strong, but it's hard to say. I think that this item, Fury Trance, for the most part, kind of sucks. I would say it feels a little underwhelming. Fire rate and bullet resist are kind of nice, but the heroes that want this item, in my opinion, don't really care about the bullet resist. For example, the best use case I can think of is Haze during her ultimate, but she doesn't really care about the bullet resist. So I'm not really sold on this item. I have to see it more. It could be really strong. 40% bullet resist is a ton. You know, but at the same time, it's only for 6-second duration, and you could just buy Warp Stone, which would give you the same amount of resist. So the biggest advantage is the fire rate, and you don't really get much more lifesteal, right? You go from 16 to 22, so I'm not really sold on this item yet. I think Warp Stone and Superior Stamina, or Stamina Mastery, sorry, are still really strong, so, you know, definitely very strong. And as far as the tier 4s go, balance-wise, I think this Cheat Death item is like, it's alright. I think it's good situationally, but I don't think it's actually really that good. One thing I want to mention about the tier 4 Vitality items is a lot of these items have Spirit Resist on them, right? So if you're struggling with Spirit Resist and you buy Spirit Resilience and one of the tier 4 items, that's essentially how you can get to a lot of Spirit Resist. So if you have Spirit Resilience and Spellbreaker, for example, you'll have like 50+% Spirit Resist. Cheat Death also gives you Spirit Resist, which may also give you Spirit Resist, etc. I think Colossus is still quite strong. One thing to keep in mind about both Colossus and Fortitude is that they are overall nerfed compared to their previous counterparts. What I mean by that is that flat health is no longer as good as it was before. The reason for that is because every hero's base health and health boons were increased. What this means is that every hero just has more health in general. So flat health, since the flat health wasn't increased at all, it essentially is worse, and you get a lot of health just from having green items in general, from the percent health that you get, because it works off of your base health. So relative to other things, the flat health in Colossus and Fortitude have essentially been nerfed. Divine Barrier is very strong. Healing Tempo is very strong. I already talked about it. Infuser might be a little overtuned right now. It's hard to say, but it's definitely very strong on specific heroes. Like Infernus, for example, really loves this item. Pocket really loves this item, etc. Inhibitor, I think, is probably one of the most underbought items. So healing is very strong right now, but there's a lot of anti-heal options. Inhibitor is one of them, and I rarely see people buy it. If you're struggling against healing, right, there's Inhibitor, Toxic Bolts, Crippling Headshot, Decay, Spirit Burn. There's quite a lot of answers, so make sure that you're just buying the different ones on your team. And if you buy different ones, they stack. It is diminishing, but they do stack, right? So just make sure that you're doing that. Juggernaut, to me, is very strong, but it's like a late game item. I don't think it's something that you rush, because if you rush it, the stats on it probably don't feel that good. But I've seen, you know, Shivs or Geist or whatever have this item and feel really strong. So, you know, it's definitely a good buy. And as far as the other tier 4 items, I think Plated Armor is probably criminally underbought. This item seems quite good, especially if the other people, let's say you're playing Viscus or Yamato and someone has armor piercing rounds, you kind of need this item. Spellbreaker seems really strong against burst damage. Like if you're playing against Yamato, you're playing against Slash, like this item is really good. Unstoppable builds out of debuff reducer, and there's a lot of CC in this patch, especially with all the spirit items that were added, which we'll cover in the next video. So I think it's not a must buy, but if you're playing a carry hero, you definitely want to consider this item, because a lot of the time, if you don't have this item, it's going to be hard to play the game. Vampire Burst, I think, is just kind of all right. I don't think it's that insane, but then again, that's just my initial thoughts. And Witchmail feels a little bit underwhelming, but I'm sure that there's use cases for it where it's really strong. For example, on Yamato, it's probably kind of insane. But at the same time, I bought it on Lash, and it actually felt really good too. So I'm not really sure yet, but it does seem like it has potential, and the cooldown reduction is significant. It is on a random ability, but you know, you keep getting 3 seconds off every time you take 75 or more spirit damage. That definitely adds up. Anyhow, just wanted to share my thoughts on these initial items. Hopefully you guys enjoy this type of content. If you'd like to see other type of content, let me know in the comments. I'll be doing the spirit items next, so tomorrow, and then the day after we'll be doing the weapon items. So expect a lot of content coming in the upcoming days, because I'm really excited about this update, and I hope you guys are too. Anyways, have a wonderful day, and thank you for watching.